creative career, it really requires repetitive, ongoing courage. It's this unfolding that is constantly unraveling that you've sort of got to follow rather than seeking out different really rigid structures, even structures that have sort of made their way into culture as consensus. Like, this is how you're meant to be pursuing this thing. And if you don't pursue it this way, then you're wrong. That's not a creative career. And I want to talk about this idea of what a creative career is and just explore how it maps on to vocations. And my name is Joe Yulee, and I am absolutely obsessed with vocations and callings and paths. It's really why I'm here on places like YouTube, Substack. I have a podcast called the Career Archetypes Podcast. And I also host this online community called the Unearthed Community, where I help people to choose the right career path with this deep sense of conviction by connecting in with their soul. And it's really my belief that every single person in this world has a calling, has something that they're meant for. And a lot of the times it's hidden from them. It's hidden from sight. It's underneath the rubble. It's underneath, the parents didn't want them to pursue the path. Their friends don't understand it. Even you yourself might fear it if you start to tap into it. Like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, that's too crazy. That's a madness. And that fear starts to rise on up. You can just, it bubbles. It bubbles up. And when it comes to a creative career, I'm not talking simply about, oh, you use some form of creativity in your work. Like, that's cool, right? If you are someone that is using creativity in your work, if you're doing graphic design, if you are, helping to make music, if you are just helping to brainstorm within a particular role at work, that's cool. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the very essence of creativity, which is going beyond the current constitution of things, like going over the wall, right? And you can think of this like there's so many different structures in the world. If we were to think about a castle, and there's a really strong, solid castle with massive walls, and everyone lives within the castle walls. They abide by the rules within the castle walls. They adhere to those rules. There's this very clear hierarchy within the castle. There's the kings and the nobles and the lower class and maybe even the peasants. And we have this structure of how things work. A creative career is about leaving the castle walls, jumping over the wall, venturing beyond it, and starting to work outside in the fringe environment, stumbling onto groups of people that people within the castle walls don't even know about, stumbling onto ideas that people within the castle walls have no idea about, and finding useful, interesting, potent insights that could only be found by going out. And it's my belief in doing this work with so many different people that this energy, this knowing of what your calling is often hidden under in the deeper layers of the psyche, really. And it's about digging and bringing that to surface. Now, a lot of creatives have this part of themselves repressed, pushed down. It's under the layers, suffocating in a lot of ways, unfortunately. And it's absolutely tragic that so many creative people have this scar, for some it's a festering wound. And it was brought upon them oftentimes because parents, told them, no. You should not be pursuing that path. Instead, what you need to do, young creative person, is go and pick the most traditional career path that is repetitively asking you to do the same thing again and again and again and again and again. And I'm referring here to things like doctor, lawyer, tradie. There are so many different paths that require this repetitive nature, which is really antithetical to creativity. Creativity wants you to step beyond, go into the new. Well, how can I step into the new if I'm having to do the same thing on repeat all the time? Now, we can think about this through this other lens of more of a Jungian psychology lens of, hey, maybe we need to nurture the side that requires repetitive functionality in the world, whereby you can actually do the same thing for a longer period of time. And I agree. I think that people need to balance that side of themselves out. They need to nurture unnurtured parts in the same way that we see someone that is hyperlogical, right? They are hyperlogical, they're always in their head, they're always purely thinking, they're detached from feelings. In the same way that that person has to connect in with the feeling of life, with the emotional content of life, with being able to cry, right? Being able to be angry, being able to be excited and elated. And by the way, by the same token, the person with feeling has to learn how to get that even-keeled thought process down, and they need to nurture that side of themselves. They do need to sit with logical analysis. Okay, if this is here, then the next thing is here, and the next thing is here, and here's the reason for the entire premise. And really coming into the sense of union with these two counterpoints. And the same thing goes for creativity. And we do need to nurture this traditional side of ourselves, the side of ourselves that wants things to repeat ongoing. But there's a staleness there too, which is what the traditional paths are always lacking, and it's why creativity is so incredibly important. Because it needs life. It needs novelty. And so the creative person is naturally geared towards creativity. And so whilst we need to nurture the side of ourselves of tradition, we also need to amplify, step into, embody our gifts rather than deny them or turn ourselves into some sort of contorted form that says, oh, yeah, I am the traditional person. I am the person that's doing all the right things. Look at this, mum and dad. Right? And some of you might be like half laughing, half crying. Like, oh God, I have to break away from my parents' expectations in order to properly pursue my own creativity. Yeah, you do. And I'll tell you why you do. Because your life is about your own soul's development. And your soul, this divine part of yourself, this part of yourself that exists after you are buried in the ground and have left this life, or if you're like me, maybe you've decided to cremate yourself when your days are done. But when it comes to the soul's development, it often is non-caring about what your parents think, what your friends think, what society thinks, even what you currently think about your situation right now. Your opinion of yourself right now is probably getting in the way. And this is why creativity requires this ongoing courage. Because there are pieces of ourselves that are alerting us. It's like we have an antenna and it's like ding, 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 ding. Hey, you need to step into the creative path. Now, I do want to touch about this idea of a creative career and what I mean by that, because sometimes people hear creative career and they start to think of industry standards. Oh, creative career? Well, maybe that's graphic design. Maybe that's website design. Maybe that's branding. Maybe that is a classic traditional painting, and I need to present my painting on social media in a particular way. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about creativity in the path itself. One of the most interesting things to me, it's one of the things that I tell people that are hyper-creative all the time, is don't just apply your creativity to the medium that you've chosen or the mediums that you've chosen. What do I mean by that? Okay, let's say you are a very creative writer and you are super into fantasy fiction and you have all this creativity and you're pouring it into that. And then everywhere else in your life it looks the same as everyone else, meaning that you haven't placed or poured any creativity into anything outside of the book. For example, your bedroom, your clothing, the way that you speak and express, the places that you go, how you travel somewhere. There's this really cool poem by Charles Bukowski. It's called Style. And I can't remember the exact line that he says that I want to refer to here, but he starts to talk about style. It's not about what you think it should be expressed as. Like, I'm super stylish because I've got this really cool jacket from a designer brand. It's about the energy. And you can apply that energy to anything. I think he might say something like, someone with style can open like a can of tomatoes and still be stylish. I'm absolutely butchering that quote. And, if you're hearing that and you're a Bukowski fan, I apologize. But the idea being that it's about the energy. It's the same thing with creativity. If you have creativity, it can be everywhere, including your path, including how you make money, including how you approach career decisions. And often it is one of the most powerful facets and talents that someone has when they do have it, and yet they're not using it. They're kind of just like, oh, creativity is this thing that I do when I'm doing this, when I'm painting, when I'm video editing, or thinking about writing a script for a film. It's over here. And over here is the serious work. It's like over here, when I'm thinking about how to structure my business, then I have to get serious. And you can have a level of professionalism to it, of course. But creativity, and bringing that over, as you would know, if you are creative, has a different energy. It's not the serious tax man. It's the like, oh, what's that? Like, let's go outside and let's move beyond what we're being given. And coming into this awareness of, okay, I need to bring my creativity forward into the world, is something that, like I mentioned, can be incredibly daunting if you're not used to it. Or it can be incredibly daunting taking it from within the medium and starting to place it into other places. But what you'll notice is that you start to stumble into unknown territory, fringe domain, picking up things that other people just haven't seen before. It's interesting. I am, like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a philosopher. And I look a lot at the domain of philosophy, and I don't really sit within what they're up to at the moment. And one of the things that I've noticed is that I feel like a lot of modern people who would call themselves philosophers, they're not philosophers. And the reason that I say that is oftentimes they are studying past philosophers. They're reading Nietzsche, Hegel, Kant, Hume, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Singer. They're going over the trolley problem, ethics, epistemology, based on other people's thoughts, and they're really trying to understand how these people were thinking through things. And they can be incredibly articulate and are able to express different viewpoints on the entire field of philosophy. But when they're talking about it, it comes through like history. And if you start to, or if you follow any philosophers, you'll start to notice this, if you haven't already, that when they start to talk about these people, they'll start like, Kierkegaard, he talked about anxiety. And they'll start to talk about his viewpoints. They might even associate themselves with particular people to say that they are a particular category of philosopher. I'm an existentialist because I resonate with Sartre. And they'll really connect into that. Now, the interesting thing with that, for me, being someone that is creative, is that I naturally don't really get super into trying to memorize someone else's philosophy. I definitely have an interest. I'll definitely look at them and be like, oh, that's interesting. And they can bring up other philosophers and dates and terms and definitions better than I can. But what they can't do is they can't create philosophy, which I think is a big problem. Because if you're a philosopher, you have to come to your own conclusions and you have to create your own philosophy, your own worldview, how you see the world, what you think is true. And the reason I bring this up is because I've been pursuing my own philosophy and have stumbled onto certain things. Like I mentioned, I stumbled onto and created this concept called temptation paths. Now, temptation path is a path whereby someone pursues something that isn't the thing. It's not their vocation, it's not their calling, it's not their path, but they're pursuing it for some other reason. Safety, status, money, to be loved. These are different reasons why people pursue temptation paths. I pursued a temptation path back in, I want to say 2015, whereby I was working for an insurance company. And it wasn't until 2019 where I left to pursue philosophy full time. And I pursued that temptation path because money, survival. And there were other temptation paths that were actually closer, and this happens to everyone, where temptation paths are actually harder to discern when they're closer to the actual thing itself because they're activating parts of it. And what I mean of it is temptation paths will activate parts of your career archetype in such a way that you'll think that it's the real thing and you should pursue that thing, and it's not the actual thing itself. To give you an example, I remember I worked with a student and she was doing Reiki healing. And if you don't know what Reiki healing is, it's a type of energy healing. Oftentimes you'll see people using their hands without touch over the body to do this. And she knew that this wasn't really quite for her. And it wasn't really hitting her in the deepest parts of her soul where she's like, this is the thing. Because when you know what your vocation is, what ends up happening is you end up realizing with this really solid, clear knowing that this is the path. Some people experience it as this moment of revelation. Some people experience this as this really quiet, solid conviction that, oh, this is what I meant to be doing. But she hadn't had that. She hadn't experienced that. And what we ended up doing was we unearthed her career archetype. We ended up finding out that she was actually a public orator, and that was her career archetype. And what ended up happening was we ended up realizing that Reiki healing was the temptation path because she wanted to transfer energy. And the thing was that she was trying to transfer that energy in this role, whereas she wanted to actually be able to transfer energy using her voice, her message, her wisdom. And that was actually how it needed to be expressed. And so this was a temptation path because it was kind of close to the real thing. It activated the public orator in such a way where she thought, okay, maybe this is it, without going to the depths and really making sure, is this the thing? Because you really want to know, is this the thing at the core archetypal base level? And coming into connection with that is really important. Now, if we go back to thinking about creative careers, and one of the reasons why they do require courage is because you're tapping into that base level primal archetypal energy, and you're bringing it up to surface. You're letting it flow out and into the world. You're letting it come out. And that inevitably is going to go beyond current structures that you've been provided with. You even see people nowadays, they'll say, okay, I'm going to start an online business, and then they'll find a coach, or they'll find an online course, and they'll try to do the exact same model as someone else. And it never works as well as the person that created that model. Why? Because that person was creating it from themselves, their own DNA. It's kind of like, oh, okay, that kind of works, but now I've got to synthesize this. I've got to make it mine. So that's a creative act. Right? Personalizing it. Jung would call it individuating it. Right? Making it yours. And seeing so many people struggle to really step into this is sort of just heartbreaking because they've got so much to give. And they typically know this too. They typically have heard, whispers of like, there's more for you than this. There has to be more for you than this. When I was in that insurance gig, before I left to be a philosopher, I knew deep down that there was something more than this. I knew that I could do something that was worthy of my mortality. And to bring this back to the philosophers out there, I often see that there are some where I'm like, oh, that person is creative, because I've just been around creative people so much in my work and my life. And I can see when they're creative, and I can see that they're often being held back because they want to adhere to the standards of what the philosopher is meant to look like. And by adhering to these standards, they never step over the line and start to find out, oh, what do you have within you? What do you have to say? What's your actual philosophy? I don't care about what Hegel said. I don't care about what Hume said. Unless it's him. What do you think? And that is a massive misstep when you have the creative gene. And you have the creative gene if you simply find yourself needing to create things. You can't help it. Even if you just accidentally, I accidentally started writing something that was a bit strange, or a bit, I was writing in a weird way, I was changing the form of how I was writing. Oh, okay. Yeah, you got some creativity to you. So I want to encourage people that have that creative ability within them to take that creative ability and to start to pour it into their career. And I know that it requires courage. I know that you're going against the way of things, your way of things, how you're used to acting in the world. But it provides this sense of soul liberation. And I'm saying this from, over the wall. It's like I'm yelling over the wall and saying, like, hey, there's all this cool creative stuff over here. Come on over. And maybe one of you will come on over. Majority of people won't. The majority of people will be like, yeah. I'm going to stay inside the castle because that looks scary. So I'm talking to the one person that's going to jump over the wall. Telling them that it will be worth it. Telling you that if you're feeling that, it'll be worth it. And if you're interested in learning more about how I help people to choose the right career path with conviction, then I would highly encourage you to check out our online community where I show people and guide people to choose the right career path with conviction by unearthing their very own career archetype. Inside, we have this 8-week course, and that 8-week course goes through this multiple perspective model. We use a bunch of different lenses in order to help you to really articulate and come into connection with your calling. We look at things like astrology, Jungian psychology, feedback loops, social understanding. We also look at things like your interests, your multiple interests, and we distill the essence down so that you know, okay, out of all these different interests, why are you being pulled into this? And how do these things weave into the fabric of your vocation, of your calling? Because oftentimes people that have many different interests need to find the essence and bring them into cohesion. So we do that. We show you what your career archetype is and how to connect into it. And then we also help you to map out the very first steps so that you can start to make it real in the world. Because it's not just about unearthing your career archetype, it's about living it and living it in a way so that you can support yourself financially and you can live a lifestyle that you absolutely love.